I would like to greet the members of the Congress and congratulate them on having a meeting that allows them to talk about the most wonderful, valuable and precious things that there is, the future. Because by their discussions and their ideas, we're of course going to be able to shape it. We can't predict the future very well, because our brains are not good at making long-term predictions. However, we do predictions every day. That's actually what our frontal lobes are doing simple predictions about mechanics and action. We make predictions about our lives. And we can attempt making predictions and plans for the future. It's just that it's much harder. However, we're also intelligent beings that can refine our methods. We can work together and become better at coming up with good plans for the future. That involves envisioning the future. And that involves seeing what could go wrong and see what could be very beneficial. And then we can implement that, and we can use the magnificently extended cognition that language allows us, that telecommunication allows us, and indeed the kind of collective intelligence that emerges from conferences. That's why I'm very happy that this Congress is taking place, and I'm really looking forward to see how it will guide the future. So I think that for the development of humanity over this century, there are certain areas of technology which are going to be very important. One important aspect is automation, the ability to construct systems, machines and software that can act on their own, that can do intelligent processes of various kinds. Ideally, we want to have control over these ones. So that means that we need better ways of interfacing humans to these ones. And it might be through smart user interfaces and gadgets, but it might also be through direct connections. This is very important because we want our will, our ideas and values to manifest in the world. And we're using technology to do that. So as technology becomes more advanced, we must also make it better at understanding what we want and implement it. And that's going to require intelligent technology and stronger links to it. But in the longer term, of course, we want to do something about our physical state, our biological condition as humans. It's certainly not bad. It's nice to be a human, it's nice to be alive, but we could be healthier, we could live longer. And there are various ways of doing that. But in the end, biotechnological means of extending human capacity are limited by the limitations of biology. And I do think that we're going to enhance ourselves using artificial means. At first, maybe implants, but in the longer run, by transferring our consciousness to machines, if that's technically possible. And I do think this is a very important development that are going to affect our economy, our society, and our view of the world over this century. One of the most interesting possibilities, in my opinion, mainly because this is my old research area, is to simulate and emulate the human brain. So right now we have computational neuroscience. We set up simulations of the connections between neurons and the impulses moving between them, and then we try to adjust these models to fit real biological data, both in how the brain is constructed, but also the results. So right now we have fairly good memory models. We have an idea, we think, of how memories are stored in the brain. We have much less understanding of high-level conditions in the brain, like emotions and consciousness. We don't really know what experiments to test for it. Memory is very easy. You can see if a simulation remembers something or if it doesn't. But people are increasingly investigating these more advanced states of the mind. And I think we're going to get enough data to start constraining the simulations. However, there is another way of emulating the brain, and that is actually to try to get all the little pieces right without understanding why they're connected like they are. So this approach, which I call whole brain emulation, would consist of taking a brain and then scanning it carefully, finding what is connected to what, all the chemicals and all the interactions going on a low level, without any understanding of what consciousness or intelligence is, and just simulating that. Now, according to some theories of mind, that would be enough to actually produce real consciousness, real memory, real intelligence. Of course, some philosophers and scientists disagree about this, but this is a testable proposition. With enough technology, we're going to be able to do it. In order to do a full brain emulation, we would need first scanning technology that can detect every synapse in the brain and scan them. That is not available right now, although we can do this on a very small scale. So there already exist various forms of microscopy that can scan small slices of brain tissue. And they can probably be scaled up. This looks like a fairly normal engineering challenge, not too different from what we've seen in bioinformatics, where people have been scaling up gene sequencing from enormously small sequences to today relatively cheap genome sequence of whole people. The second part is understanding these scans, turning that in an automatic fashion into a neural network simulation. That is probably the most challenging research area. But again, we have progress in computer vision and computational neuroinformatics that seem to be going there. Finally, we need enough computing power to do it. To run a human brain at this computational resolution would require an enormously powerful supercomputer. However, Moore's law is pretty positive in this regard. We are probably going to be there within 20 years. And it seems like if we don't need all the biological detail, if it turns out that you can simplify brain emulation, then we might already have enough computing power. The real problem is, of course, putting together this enormous research project. There are a lot of different research groups that need to talk to each other and realize that they are working on the same goal. I know that Dalai Lama apparently in one interview said that it might be possible to be reincarnated into a computer. So I absolutely see no contradiction between many Eastern beliefs and the idea of transferring minds into machines or a nanotechnological construct. I don't think that is, from a religious perspective, very problematic. Coming myself from a very much empirical perspective, I'm thinking that, well, the best way of finding out whether dualism is true, that there is some kind of soul material that's different from normal material, would be to try brain emulation, for example. If we scan the material parts of the brain and then try to run it in a computer, if it absolutely doesn't work at all, then that might be interesting evidence that there is something we missed. If it works very well, then either we got a good way of transferring soul material, or maybe soul material doesn't exist. So I think we're going to get interesting answers actually from experimental neuroscience and transhumanism in the near future, in the next few decades, to many of these age-old questions. I would certainly want to transfer my mind to an artificial body if the technology existed and had demonstrated that it was safe enough. Some people have a problem with this because their idea of what makes them themselves is of a particular philosophical type. And this is something that's going to be different between different people. I regard myself as the equivalence class of all Anders-like processes, which is a very abstract and slightly unusual perspective. So I have no problem with the idea of there existing multiple copies of me, backup copies of me, variants of myself. Other people might disagree on that. But I certainly think the practical benefits of being able to live forever, and transmit myself digitally, be able to run on bodies which are not biological or enhanced biological, and be able to have backup copies in case something goes wrong, would be enormous. So I think in the future I'm hoping to be software.